Hi guys, and welcome to today's session. My name is Zaheer, and I'm an ACCA member. I will be your mentor for the paper Audit and Assurance. Um, we will keep our today's session super brief so that I can give you a quick overview, first of all, of what the AA or Audit and Assurance is all about, and a very quick run through the syllabus. We will then also talk about very briefly what the exam pattern is, and lastly, how are we going to prepare for the exam, right? So let's move on. This is your index. Now the content that I'm going to use is Kaplan, right? So this is the index from the Kaplan book, and as you can see, there are about 15 chapters. So I must say that audit is probably the shortest syllabus just after the global law paper, and it is something that you can quite comfortably cover in let's say a month and a half. So if you are someone who is, let's say, preparing to give the exam in the upcoming quarter, so 3 months is a good enough time to be able to prepare for the exams. Right now, what is there in the syllabus? So as you can see, the first few chapters is really around what is audit and why the audit is required, who can do the audit, what are the auditors jobs, responsibilities, rights, etc., etc. So it just gives you a bit of a flavor of which companies do really need to do the audit, what is assurance, and which is basically around statutory audits, and what are then limited audits, which are more like a short assignment special audits kind of thing. So it gives you an overview of what the audit as a field is, right? And then it starts to move towards corporate governance, which is around what the companies are supposed to do as far as the direction is concerned, the control is concerned. So how the company will manage the business, what are the kind of things, or let's say the best practices that are supposed to be followed in the corporate governance. Let's say, for example, the corporate governance says that the chairman and CEO cannot be the same person. Why? Because these are the two most powerful positions in a company. If both the positions are held by one person, then there is no questioning of the authority there, right? The CEO can get away with anything. So like these, there are lots of other best practices that the corporate governance tells us to do. And to be fair, the kind of environment we are in, business environment we are in, we see so many companies shutting down because of scams, etc. So the corporate governance is an effort to reduce that. Then moving on to the ethics and acceptance, this is a chapter which talks about what are the key things as an auditor they will need to consider before they accept the audit assignment. Because let's face it, that when you get an audit, of course you would be very keen to work on that assignment, but there are a lot of ethical requirements around it. Why? Because let's say, I'll give you a very simple example. If my brother comes to me and says that, hey Zaheer, could you do the audit of my company? Now, I would love to do that. However, think from the stakeholders' perspective, who are, let's say, the investors in his company. Would I actually go and report to them that, hey guys, my younger brother has not been doing these things, or he has been cheating the company or whatever? So that's why one of the key things that we really learn in this chapter is around independence and all the other ethical requirements that ACCA needs you to follow before you accept an assignment. Then comes risk, which is what are the key risk around doing the audit? Because obviously, let's face it, one of the biggest risks that an auditor faces is of giving an incorrect opinion. So, what are the things that the auditor needs to look out for, and what are the kind of responses that you need to have around it? So, let's say if a company is getting listed and they are your first time clients, you know for a fact that you do not have a lot of background knowledge about the company. And plus, if a company wants to get listed, I'm sure you would know this, that there is a very high risk of manipulation. So what are the kind of things that the auditor may need to do? They may need to do more testing, substantive procedures. And again, these are the kind of things that you will learn. What's a substantive procedure? You need more experienced people, etc., etc. So those are the kind of responses that you will learn when we talk about risk. Then moving on to planning, how do you go about planning the audit? What kind of resources do you put? And if there are any kind of non-compliances, etc., how do you go about reporting them? So because look, if it's a very cliched saying, sorry, I'm going to use it, but if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. Isn't that what they say? So this is exactly how it works in the audit world as well. You have to make sure that you are planning the audit for it to be successful and for you to give the appropriate opinion, which brings us to our next topic, which is evidence. Now, evidence is, at the end of the day, the auditor can only give an opinion if they have checked enough and they have the evidence to say that yes, everything looks true and fair, right? And how do they know? Is when they have collected enough evidence and they've got the good evidence, which in our terminology will be sufficient and appropriate. So if you have sufficient and appropriate evidence, it's only then you will be able to pass an opinion whether the financials are true and fair or if they are not a true and fair. So this chapter really talks about all the evidence and what are the kind of things that you need to look out for when you are going to gather evidence. Then comes systems and controls. Now we know for a fact organizations cannot just work on individuals doing everything, right? There will be systems in place. There could be IT systems in place. There could be ERP systems in place. There are structures in how you will move things from point A to point B. And for it to work seamlessly, companies will implement controls, right? Now, controls are basically anything which ensures that the work is being done the way it's supposed to work. So let's say an accounts payable will have an approval or an authorization process in place so that, the payments are not basically made to their own accounts, the people who are in the payments team, right? So this chapter really talks about all the various systems that are in place and what are the typical controls that are in place and how do you audit them, right? And let's say if the systems are not in place, what are the kind of recommendations that the auditors needs to give, right? So this chapter is really around figuring out what are the deficiencies of controls, what are the typical problems with the controls, and how do you fix them. Then comes internal audit, as the name itself suggests. What is an internal audit? Because at the end of the day, larger organizations especially, they will have their own internal audit departments, and these internal departments can actually become quite helpful for statutory auditors as well, because they may not be able to do everything by themselves. So therefore they may seek out help for internal audit. So this chapter really talks about what are the things that an internal audit does and what an statutory or an external auditor needs to look out for before they can start using their work. Then comes procedures. Now, procedures is something you will listen, because of course, I'm sure you will, move on to the next lectures as well. And when we start to talk about all the chapters in detail, you will see that the procedures is something that will stay with you right from chapter 4, right, where you will start to talk about what are these procedures that you need to do to fix a problem, right? So these procedures really talk about how do you get the evidence from maybe receivables, maybe payables, maybe inventory, maybe cash, right? So these are the common areas which the auditors will need to go and get the evidence from, right? So the procedures will tell you all of that. Then comes completion and review. Now, the completion and review is basically before you have actually issued the opinion, what are the final checks that you'll have to do? What are the kind of reviews you need to do? Because let's face it, that in the light of all these scams and all these possible, frauds, etc., that takes place in an organization, it is imperative that the auditors have done all the checks and have done double checked and triple checked just to make sure that they don't give an inappropriate opinion, right? So there's a lot of quality checks that the companies, the clients or the audit practices needs to follow. So this chapter will really talk about that. And then comes finally the reporting. Now, reporting is, the opinion that you give. Now, if everything is fine, everything is true and fair, you don't have a problem, right? But if there is a problem, let's say in one of the areas, then what is the opinion does the auditor give? Does the auditor say that it's not true and fair, or it says that except for maybe inventory, right, everything else is true and fair? Or if the customer, your client is not giving you information, is it if they're not giving any information, do you give a disclaimer of opinion? Or those are the kind of nitty-gritties that you learn in that chapter. Then comes employability and technology skills. Now, this is common across. I'm sure if you've studied any of the chapters, ACC has introduced CBE platform on which you're supposed to know how to run the Excel or spreadsheet or the Word area. So this chapter really talks about that. Then there is summary of key ISAs. Now, good news for people like me who cannot do rote learning. So you don't have to really by heart any standards on auditing. So ISAs is international standards on auditing. So you don't have to do any rote learning. But this chapter really just gives you a quick recap on all the ISAs, because right from chapter 1 right through till chapter 12, you've got all of these ISAs that are there in pieces, right? So this chapter really just summarizes them together. And the last chapter is your financial reporting revision, which really gives you a quick glimpse of the financial reporting key standards that are relevant to the audit. Because if you do not know what's wrong with the financial, you will never be able to catch hold of, or you can never really flag them off to the clients, right? So you need to know your financial reporting standards as well. However, if you've not done financial reporting, be rest assured that whatever we cover here today, or whenever you sit and look at the lectures, right, you will be able to follow most of the things that are covered in the exam. So you don't have to really think, oh, I've not done FR, I will not be able to do the audit. We have enough students who have covered and cleared audit absolutely no problem without having sat the FR paper, right? So that's really your audit overview and really the syllabus. The exam pattern, very quickly, it's split in two parts. Now this is very different to how usually your skill level exams are, and when I say skill level, I'm really talking about from PM right through to FM, right? So where you have three sections, here you have two sections. Section A has got three 10 marks case based questions. Now that means you will be given a scenario, and then you are given 5 questions of 2 marks each that you need to answer. So now again, there is some good news here, is that not all of it will be scenario based. There are some which are knowledge based as well. So as long as you've understood the concepts well, you will be able to answer them. And of course, if you have done the lectures absolutely thoroughly, then you should not have a challenge in figuring out the others as well, right? So that's your section A, that's your 30 marks there. For the remaining 70 marks, you've got 130 marks long question, and then there are two 20 marks long questions. So it really talks about, you will have questions around internal controls and the deficiencies. You will have questions around audit risk and what are the responses. You may have questions around substantive procedures and how do you go about in detail finding out what are the, what are the evidences that you need, right? So that's your section B, and that's your 70 marks. So in all, 100 marks paper, 3-hour question, 3-hour exam. Now the exams, I'm sure you know that these are all session based exams, so you will have to sit the exam in March, June, September, December, and the exams is on the first Monday of the month. In terms of the overall pass rates, if I can really say, audit is probably one of the harder papers compared to the other papers that are out there. So you should really be conscious about the fact that this is a theory paper. So it's not something that you can just study overnight and then you will pass the exam. You will need to put in a lot of efforts to clear the exam. But as long as you have been able to do all of these things, now what is this? You cover the study text completely, right? And that is something that we will be doing in the class. Cover the exam kit. Now this is something that you will be shared on the LMS. So the learning management system will have the exam kit for you, and we will also try and do some questions in the class itself. So do the whole of exam kit, do all the mocks that are available on the LMS, and then make sure that all the practice that you are doing, especially there are some 7 papers that are there on the CBE platform. Make sure that you've done all of them on the system itself, please. Yeah, because you need to get used to how the system works. So you need to get used to, how do you scroll, how do you move from question to question. So therefore, do not really try and do everything on a piece of paper, or you do it on a Word or an Excel, because the Word Excel is very different on the CBE platform. So if you really want to crack the exam, you want to make sure that you're able to do the exam in the time allotted. CBE practice is one of the key things that you need to remember. Right. So really, that's all I wanted to cover in our introductory lecture. I hope you find this insightful. I wanted to keep this nice and short, so that you don't run away from me. But if you've really enjoyed the lecture, then I hope to see you in the next session. So all the very best, and thank you so much.